first thing I want to say is I'm really glad you're here. I really feel honored that you took the initiative, the time, and what am I going on? My computer, it's lagging. So I'm really glad you made a commitment and came, because I think this material has tremendous ability to impact how you see your wife especially, but also a tremendous ability to help you navigate that pathway of, okay, how do I honestly look at the impact of my actions in a way that allows me to go to a level of brokenness that changes my heart on deep levels, rather than superficial change that continues to look to someone else, especially my wife, to make me okay. I will tell you guys right up front that when I put this information out, I had in mind about 30 guys. But I wasn't sure that 30 guys would have the guts to come. So the first thing I want to tell you is I'm proud of you for coming. I'm not going to pull any punches or any bones right up front. I'm going to tell you right up front, this is hard material. I went through it 2 years ago with Dr. Manwala. I mean, not exactly this, because I kind of cherry-picked what I wanted to use of his. And then also, Dr. Manwala does not come from a faith perspective. He is 100% secular. And real honestly, I don't know how you go through this stuff without an understanding of grace, an understanding of the gospel. Dr. Larry Crabb, many years ago in his School of Spiritual Direction, when I attended, he made a statement that, I don't know if he was quoting someone or if it was his own statement, but it stuck with me for, that was 21 years now. And he made the statement, he said, "It is only the Christian who truly has the resources to be able to honestly face his depravity." And his point is, it's only in the context of grace. It's only when we know that in spite of what we've done, we are forgiven, that we can find the courage to look deep enough to really see the effects. I told this story in group the other night, but and then I was like, maybe I shouldn't have told that, because maybe guys won't come now. But I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago, I had my first root canal. Had a tooth that had been hurting, I had an old filling that, details don't matter. But I remember sitting in the chair, and of course I've got good Novocaine, I'm numbed up really good, so, it's annoying because you got to keep your mouth wide open, and I have some TMJ, tightness of the jaw stuff, so I hate that. But I'm hearing the drilling, I'm smelling the tooth, etc., no big deal. And then all of a sudden, I got this smell that smelled just like, and I've spent a lot of time in the woods, I'm a hunter, etc., so I've had numerous times that I've walked up on, a dead, decaying, rotting animal in the woods. And I'm like, there's a dead dog someplace. And what's that doing in a dentist's office? And that, for about 30, maybe 15 seconds or so, I'm wondering, where in the world is that stench coming from? And then all of a sudden the realization hit. Oh, that's coming from me. Because that stench came out when the drill got deep enough that it got into the decay that was causing the pain. Guys, I want you to know that in the next 2 days, you may experience something similar. You may experience a place of conviction where you smell the death. And everything within you wants to get up and run out of the room. And I want to say two things there. one, please don't. Or if you do, come back. Because I'm not going to leave you in those places of death. But then secondly, I'm going to tell you right up front, I do want you to take care of yourselves. This is hard material. And if at any point it's too much for you, feel free to step out. You're welcome to take a walk around the block if you got rain gear or if it's a break in the rain today. The basement has several rooms with couches and semi-comfortable chairs. Feel free to go and journal, pray, take a nap. Do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. Because you see, we want this to be a safe space for your emotions. And if you do not hit some strong emotions in the next 2 days, then I'm really going to be concerned about you. Okay, because the only way that you are not going to experience some strong emotions in the next 2 days is if you clamp everything down so tight that you maintain control. Because if you're like me, at the age of 21, I stood in the front of a church and I vowed to love, honor, cherish, protect the one who I thought was the most beautiful, most wonderful, most perfect woman in the world for me. And then almost immediately, I started doing just the opposite. Instead of being her protector, I began harming her. I often tell in my own story that subconsciously, I don't think I had enough self-awareness to recognize it, but subconsciously I realized even before the honeymoon was over, I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of defects or faults in my beautiful wife, but because I realized that I had given the one person whose opinion of me mattered more to me than anyone else in the world 24/7 access to discover what a fraud I was. And that scared me witless. And that sent me hiding. My wife will tell you that in the first year of our marriage, she was so confused. She was like, "Where did he go? He pursued me. He worked so hard to talk me into marrying him. And then all of a sudden we got married and he was gone." And a significant part of where I went to was in my fear, in my terror of being found out, in my loneliness because I'm hiding even more now than I was before. I returned to or continued my old habits of pornography, not much really, because this was 1987 and I didn't have good access to it and I wasn't going to go buy anything. But here's the other part of that, guys, is most of you know, if you have ever looked at porn, you never have to look at another porn material to always have porn available. So even though I wasn't going out and getting porn, I was accessing it in my mind, and my hidden habit of masturbation was as I look back, it was my primary coping mechanism. And it was completely hidden. Well, not as well hidden as I thought it was. And so the first time my wife caught me, she was hurt. She was upset. She was asking things like, "Well, why are you doing that? Wake me up. We were in the honeymoon phase." And I made a statement to her that probably encapsulates my secret sexual basement. What I said to her was, I said, honey, I won't ever do that again. And what I didn't say out loud was the ending clause of that sentence. I won't do that again in a way that you will know about. Because in my male entitled mind, she's a woman and she doesn't understand these things. She's wired differently. And so in my mind, it was justified, it made sense because she doesn't get it. And so I just kept digging my basement deeper. And so I tell you that just to kind of set the stage to know that when I went through Manwala's 22 rooms 2 years ago, even though I had been sexually sober, I hadn't looked at porn, I hadn't masturbated in, so that was 22, and in 22 years. I got some things at a level I'd never gotten them before. And there were a lot of big emotions that came up. And so I want to encourage you that that's okay. So as these things bubble up for you, kind of an umbrella picture I want to give you for the next 2 days is allow God to do the good work of legitimate guilt in your heart. And ask Him and let Him protect you from it going over the cliff into a place of toxic shame that tells you you're worthless and that He has no purpose for you. Because I got bad news and I got good news for you this weekend. The bad news is that as bad as you think your mess is, it's a lot worse than you think it is. The good news is Jesus' perfect work is an overpayment for even how bad that mess is. And just a quick side note here, and I'll mention it again for the end of the day unless I forget, which if I do, hopefully it'll stick with you. I didn't make New Hope Church tomorrow part of this seminar. But for those of you who don't know, New Hope Church is now, we're basically a house church that happens to have a building, and the main reason we still have a building is because of this recovery ministry. So tomorrow I have a sermon that is really a sermon that has been percolating in my head for probably 10 years now. And it's a sermon that I believe God's doing a really deep work in. And so I want to invite each of you, if you're able, to join us tomorrow. Invite you to invite your wife if she's in a place to be by your side in any way. If she's not, please do not pressure her. Please do not add to anything. But it will be mostly men here tomorrow. You need to forewarn your wife about that if she is going to come. But my wife, some other ladies will be here, and she won't be on her own, but she will be outnumbered. But we would love to have you tomorrow at 10:15. Not required. And thanks to Kyle, it will be videoed. It will be on my YouTube page at some point. So there will be other opportunities to get it. But like so many things, there's just much more impact when you're in the room in those things. So if you can join us, great, tomorrow. If you can't, that's okay. 10:15. The other thing kind of setting the stage is it's important for you to know that defenses are normal and are to be expected. Some of you may be sitting here thinking, I'm here because my wife pretty much put a gun to my head and said I had to be, and he's going to tell me how horrible I am, and a whole bunch of other things, and the noise is coming up, and the earmuffs are getting tighter, and I get that. The hardest thing for the human psyche to do is to look honestly at the harm we've caused someone we love. And so defenses are going to come up. Shutting down is a possibility. You may go to emotional numbing. You may find yourself just extremely fatigued or tired. You may find yourself disassociating. Your mind's off someplace else. You're finding anything else to think about, etc. You may get angry. And just a side note, if you get angry with me, that's okay. Don't hit me. Don't break things. But it's okay to be angry with me. We probably don't have the format for you to argue it out with me or to have the conversation today or tomorrow. But if you get angry with me, it's okay. I'm probably going to say some things that you're going to think, well, he's heard from my wife and he pulled that out especially for me. I promise you, anything I pull out, I've not heard from one wife. I've heard from multiple wives, very similar stories. I don't have anything in here targeted for any single person here today. Okay? Your defenses are normal, to be expected, but I want to encourage you, challenge you to take some deep breaths along the way and to say, okay, God, what do you have for me? And why does the enemy want me to have such a big wall in front of me? I also want you to know this process is, Dr. Manwala calls it a personal illumination process. And the goal is to honestly look at the impact of our actions. The image right here is the image of a man sitting on the top of a hill looking down on a village that he has been part of bombing out. And that's what we're doing today, guys. Is we're going to take a close, hard look at the impact of the bombs we've dropped. Again, going back to the previous slide, your defenses may be coming up. You may say, well, my wife's dropped a bunch of bombs too. Yeah? But guess what? She's not here today. Today, tomorrow, we're not addressing any of her bombs. I hope after today and tomorrow, some of her bombs will make more sense. You know, there's an old phrase, hurt people hurt people. And please understand, even wives who have been just had their world blown up by our betrayals are still responsible for how they respond. So I do not hear in me that I'm saying that a wife is justified in doing abusive, harmful things back to you because of what she's experienced. No. If I'm talking to her, if I'm working with her, we would address those things. But what I will tell you is that many of our wives' actions that we have held on to as justification and that age-old thing of, well, I don't have to look at how bad I've been because I can see how bad this other person is. We're not playing that game here. Our job, our work, is to look closely at our actions and the worlds that we've created by our actions. And to help us do that, especially to help us with our defenses, I want us to do something that we have learned through brain science, through recovery, is one of the most powerful ways to stay connected. And that is the deliberate work of appreciation. I want you to think of the appreciation that we're about to do as like a hand grip on a wall. When we do this appreciation exercise, and especially when I have you name it and share it with someone, I want you to think of that like a hand grip that's been nailed in a wall, so that if at any point you start sliding off and falling down the wall, you have something to grab hold of. One of my favorite things about appreciation is something you can fail at and it still helps. And where I get that from is they did a study at the University of Southern California. It might have been UCLA. I get those two mixed up all the time. And they had participants come and they had them do, they put them in the fMRI machine. That's the one that takes pictures of the brain, video of the brain as it's in action, and it has colors based on blood flow and I don't know what else. But by that, they're able to see how well the brain is functioning. And so they put participants in the machine and they gave them the assignment to think of things that they can appreciate. And to no surprise, because they had already done some research on appreciation, they saw that every single participant had improved brain colors. No surprise. The surprise came in the follow-up interview. And a number of the participants reported that, yeah, I was anxious about being in the machine, and I felt pressure, and I kept trying to find something I could appreciate, and I never found an appreciation. And so the researchers went back and looked closer at their brain scans, and guess what? They still showed improvement. And so here's what I surmise from that. The very act of attempting to find an appreciation helps your brain calm down. And I love things that I can fail at miserably and they still help me. And so this exercise, for those of you who are working through my New Hope for Sexual Integrity Recovery Manual, it's one of the core dailies. I also find many times guys don't realize that, haven't read it close enough or haven't done it in a group or anything like that, so they don't know really how to do the exercise. It's really simple. And so what we're going to do here in a minute is we're going to take 2 or 3 deep breaths together. And then I'm going to prompt you to ask Jesus to remind you of something you can appreciate. And then what I want you to do is just take the next couple minutes and talk to Him. There's space. Let's see, we're on page 2. I forgot to mention that. If there's a P dot and a number on a slide, that tells you what page we are in the workbook. Unless I messed up a number. But it'll at least be close, all right? But so what I want you to do in that is just ask Jesus to remind you of something you can appreciate. Whatever comes to your mind, just talk to Him about what comes up. Now, people all the time say, well, what if I'm making it up? What if I, etc.? Okay, go with it anyway. It'll still help your brain. But then let's take it a little deeper. Let's think about that for a moment. I know for a fact, because I know many of you, that we have pretty much every theological niche of Christianity represented here today. So we have people on the fundamental end, we got people on the liberal end, we got people, we've got probably a few of you in here right now who are wondering if God even exists. So I know we got guys all over the spectrum. But I want you to think about this for a moment. If God can do anything in our world, how difficult would it be for Him to prompt a memory to come up in our minds? In the realm from, all the way up to raising the dead or calming the sea, You know, I think that would be pretty low end, don't you think? So, if you're open to God being at work at all in our world, then when you ask Jesus to remind you of something and a thought pops in your head, give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he is speaking to you in a still, quiet voice that we so often overlook. Okay? Then I want you to ask Jesus if there's anything he wants you to know about your appreciation. And then just write anything that comes to mind. So, clear enough? All right, let me pray for us. So, Father, we come to you this morning, and Lord, I sense your delight. I sense how proud you are that these men came today. That they said, okay, I want to know how to address the ways that I have hurt and harmed my wife. And I want to understand things that are going to be hard to hear. You're proud of the guys who've driven in from long ways, who've changed flights, who've done all sorts of things just to get here. And you're delighted in the guys who drove across town, gave up their Saturday, gave up at least part of their Sunday. And so, Lord, I thank you for that. But I ask, Lord, that as we transition into this time, that you would calm our defenses. Lord, I know that there are guys in the room, their heart's racing, their blood pressure is up. They're fearful of where I may go today. They're fearful of what their wife would think, of what the ramifications might be. And so, Lord, I just ask that you help calm their nervous system because you created it, and that you use this simple tool of the breath that you have given us and that you have taught us helps calm that system. And so, if you would, just count of 3, I want you to take a deep inhale with me and then exhale, and we'll do that a couple times. So 1, 2, 3, inhale and exhale. And inhale and exhale. And one more time as we transition into some extraordinary space. Inhale and exhale. Now just each of you ask Jesus that simple question. Jesus, please remind me of something I can appreciate. And then start writing down anything that comes to your mind. And ask him if there's anything he wants you to know about that appreciation, that memory, that thought. And then next, I want you to give that appreciation a 1, 2, or at the most 3-word name. And then next, I want you guys to kind of form groups of 2s or 3, at least, 3 is ideal, 2 is okay in this context, 4 take too long. And spend just a couple minutes, 30 seconds apiece, telling one another the name of your appreciation. And what I want you to do is make sure you write down, these are going to be your partners, these are going to be your safety people. Write down the name of their appreciation. So let's just turn in groups of at least 2, if 3's best, turn and find some people and share your appreciation with. All right, now guys, I can't believe when I said, especially when you see a P and and a number beside it, that means a page number. Nobody said, well, you're still on your first slide up there, because I had the projector frozen. So anyway, you guys missed a few slides. Yeah, like I described that guy on the hillside looking down on the bombed out village. And anyway, I'll pull those up later. But where I want to go now is I want to share a couple video clips with you. About a month ago, Debbie and I started watching, we finished whatever series we were watching, and I just randomly picked something. And it's a PBS Masterpiece series called Unforgotten. And I had in mind this seminar, and wow, there's a sub-story within the main story that speaks very powerfully to what we are looking at this weekend. And the backstory on this is there's been a murder. It's a kid that was killed 40 years ago. His bones were buried under where they were doing construction, so it got concreted over, and it's not been seen. So they found the bones. They're now investigating a murder that everybody had, a disappearance from 40 years ago. And as a result of that, some things have come to light about an Anglican priest, a Father Geary, who was involved in this kind of hostel that these young people were living in, staying in, etc. And as a result of that, a, quote, relationship that he had had 39 years earlier is coming to light in the police investigation. And undoubtedly, he was in one of those places where he believed either I have to tell my wife about it or the police are going to question her and it's going to come out. And so this scene you're going to watch is him, quote, confessing to his wife for the first time. All right, from these questions or just your own thoughts, or half of you saw this Tuesday, or at least listened to it with no video, but anyway, joys of Zoom. As you think about this scene, as you spend a little time reflecting, what stood out to you? How is that impacting you?
I heard a lot of minimization, like it was brief, it didn't last long, it was 39 years ago, just trying to minimize the impact of what he did.
Yeah, huge minimizations. Justification. Yeah, the pain on his wife's face. Really, what I see there is just the shock. She's in that place of numb.
I wonder what else he's hiding.
Wonder what else he's hiding? That'll come out in the next clip we're going to watch. The wheels spinning inside of her head. Did you notice how she responded when she asked who it was and he said Joanna? I remember her. Well, let's deal with him remembering her first. Why do you think she remembered Joanna? She'd picked up on something. Something didn't feel quite right. What are you saying, Andy?
He referred to her as a woman, she referred to her as a girl, and then he don't even do that, he said a person.
Yeah. Okay. Quick side note here, guys. We find this out later. I don't know if it's this episode or the next. She was actually 15 years old. Okay? So look at the minimization that's happening. Think also about, what do you think that's been like for a, quote, man of God to carry this secret for 39 years? Guilt, shame. Yeah, why is he sharing it? Yeah,
show that it has no remorse for the young girl as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about that some. Okay? I do want to circle back to that, Chris. But what I want you to see, where I was going with this, first of all, is that it's like, in his mind, it's 39 years ago. But what impact has this secret had on his and his wife's emotional, relational intimacy for the last 39 years? Yeah. A lot of you guys have heard me use the zero factor in illustration. Think of multiplication numbers. 12 times 13 times 76 times whatever number you want to put in there times 0 times whatever other number you want to put in there equals what? 0. This secret is his zero factor. It doesn't matter how well in these past 39 years she's loved him at any point. What has his brain done with that? If she knew about Joanna, she wouldn't be loving me this way. What about any success he has in ministry, in life? Well, if they knew about Joanna, guys, the secrets destroy us. The age-old saying in 12-step and other, in recovery in general is, you are only as sick as your secrets. Now, let me dispel one other thing real quickly here, though. Some of you are sitting here thinking, well, boy, I'm glad I never had an affair. I'm glad I never crossed that line. I'm glad I never, et cetera, et cetera. Glad I only did porn. I've been working with couples now for about 23 years. And in my own story, I never crossed the flesh line either. So I understand this minimization, this rationalization quite well. In fact, that was, kind of the beginning place of my confession to my wife is it's never gone beyond porn. And I think for those of us who've never, and even for those who have, as men, we kind of have this scale in our mind. You think if the pain our wives feel could be measured on a scale of 0 to 100, in our minds we think, well, if a guy's only done porn, his wife might be, she might be a 35, maybe a 55. But if a guy's actually had crossed the flesh line, well, then his wife's got to be at 97. Guys, through the years of doing disclosures, of talking with wives, I've discovered that many wives whose husbands have, quote, only done porn, experience just as much pain as wives who've had multiple affairs. And so using that ridiculous numerical scale, it's not 45 to 97. It might be on average 91 to 97. And your particular wife may be at 99. And guess what? If she is, the things we'll learn today and tomorrow will help that make more sense. And she is where she is. And it is my job to love my wife as Christ loved the church, not where I want her to be, but where she is. There were a couple other hands up for thoughts on this scene. Yeah.
I think the thing that I relate to is how we try to control her. At the very beginning, he had to tell her to sit down, which is a subtle way to try to tell her that he knows what she needs.
Excellent observation. Remind me your name?
Kenny.
Kenny. Good to see you, Kenny. Talk to you on the phone. So, Kenny brings up a great point here. Do you see how he's trying to maintain control of the story? Notice how we all do that? But here's the reality, guys. The moment my sin crossed over into somebody else's yard, I lost control of the story. Illustration I've used for that for years is imagine your neighbor's got a big dead tree in his backyard. And you move in, new house, you got a nice fence, you've got your kids' playground equipment, etc., right in the line of that tree. So you go to the neighbor and you say, hey, I'm concerned about that tree. I'll even help you take it down. And the neighbor says, I like that tree just the way it is. What can you do about it? Nothing. You know, maybe in some cities you could complain to the city and the city might come out and tell him it's a hazard and require him to. But in most places, there ain't a thing you can do about his tree. But then imagine one day a storm blows through and that tree falls over, crashes through your fence, and over half of the tree is now in your yard. Now what can you do with the part of the tree that's in your yard? Get the chainsaw. You can cut it up, you can do whatever you want, because guess what? His problem's now in your yard. See where I'm going here? How many of us, even in our confessions to our wives, have put pressure on her to not tell anyone? Or controlled who she tells? It's still part of that coercive control. And Kenny nailed it right from the very beginning. He's trying to control, trying to maintain control. But guys, once the cat's out of once our sin's out of the bag, we've lost control. Doug?
Yeah, he starts off right away covering his butt. He very respectfully says, person. I mean, come on.
Says what?
I said, come on.
Yeah. Right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Matt? Oh, we're only as sick as our secrets, was the statement. Andy?
Just the idea that you hit me that this idea that this is 39 years ago, so everything she's experienced in this reality since then, she's got to be questioning what's real and what's not.
Yeah. A term we will circle back to often, Dr. Manwala has a term called intentionally manipulated reality. IMR for short. Think of her IMR that she's experienced for 39 years. Something feels off. No, honey, everything's fine. Something in her gut has struggles hearing him preach, hearing him do spiritual leadership, and yet he's the priest. And everything appears normal. And yet here he is. Kyle?
I wrote down that she asked, when did this happen?
Yeah.
And it was like right after they got married. And to me, she's going to be asking herself, wasn't I enough? Yeah.
Exactly. 1 year into marriage, and what does the enemy do in her mind with that? Yeah. What's wrong with me that 1 year into marriage, he has a relationship with someone else? But it's brief, just a little while. Yeah. And what we will find as the story unfolds is it continues layer upon layer of, oh, this is icky worse. In fact, why don't we go ahead? I know you've got more thoughts, and a lot of those will come out in this second scene. Because the second scene is when the mom, the wife, is telling their two, I think the lights are good the way they are, Gary. The second scene, the wife is now telling their two grown daughters about what she's learned. One critical backdrop here is an earlier scene. The younger daughter, the one, her name Ellie, who is kind of in the denial place, she's about to get married, and her husband is an atheist, and so he wants the wedding to be a non-church wedding. And so in an earlier scene, Father Greaves has manipulated the dinner conversation around why it's so important that the wedding be in the church. Because after all, God holds marriage in such high standards. Now what I'd like you to do is just turn in groups of 3s, 4s, 5 if you need to, depending on, pews are not the best of this, but I want you to just discuss what your reflections are on this. Let's do this in kind of a smaller group setting initially. All right, guys, we're going to take just a few minutes to process it all together now, and then I'll give you guys about a 15-minute break. But I want you to think in your group discussion, what was the most impactful thing that somebody in your group said? They're caught up in their own pain, so they've lost mom. And think of the weight mom carries here. Mom is in mom role. Even her opening statement, well, I'm sorry for you. She's still having to be the one carrying the weight for her daughters. Great observation. What else? What other? Daughters are asking, or the one daughter is asking questions the mom was probably asking in her own head. And actually both daughters were, because the denial daughter, undoubtedly the wife went through aspects of denial as well. Why do you think Ellie was in such a place of denial?
She didn't want the illusion of her dad to leave her.
Yeah, it's crushing. It's amazing how often we would rather live in denial and keep the illusion of our world together than to face truth. And yet life, when it's not lived on truth, is always crumbling. Yeah, there's also that fear. If my father, the Anglican priest, can do this, what does that do to their perceptions of men in general? Absolutely. Ellie is in a place of trauma, a place of disassociating, a place of denial, because this is scary. Well, that's one of the storylines here. Her wedding's coming up. Kaz is getting ready to have a baby. There's a pretty powerful scene later on when Kaz has to have an emergency C-section, and Father Geary comes to Father Greaves. I keep calling him Geary, so anyway, you know who I'm talking about. Father Greaves comes to the hospital, and the mom comes out, and she says, everybody's okay, baby's doing great, and she's got that excited grandma look, and then she looks at him and she says, we were supposed to be so happy right now. And not a knife that she's trying to twist, but just the knife of, that is our reality right now. Absolutely, and it goes beyond disclosure, because that doesn't go away when the husband tells the truth. It only goes away when the wife gets to a place where she feels confident that she's finally gotten the truth. Because, let's be honest, there's been so many half-truths, there's been so many partial disclosures, there's been so many false steps that most wives are like, okay, that's good. I hope that's all of it. But how can I know this is all of it? Doug?
Our group came to the consensus that they did not know who the dad, who he really was.
I think that's the biggest thing here, is who is this man? Who is he? And because I don't know who he is, everything in my world is now a mess. And we don't know why. We don't know if the wife, preempted everything. My hunch is, he says, well, no, this is my confession to my wife. It doesn't really affect my girls. Yeah, it does. Think of the image of a perfectly calm pond and a rock gets thrown out in the middle of it. Those ripples go a long ways. And one of the lies that we believed is that we can successfully compartmentalize things. That we can keep it in our world and it only affects this part of me, and, well, that's the very next section. So a couple more thoughts and then we'll take a break. Yeah, let me touch just briefly on that place of the accusation. When our wives come to us with the question, and our thought, whatever the question may be, our first reaction is to hear an accusation. I can't believe you would think I would harm our kids. How could you think I would do X, Y, or Z? And this scene can help us recognize that their world is, in a tsunami. Everything is spinning. They don't know who we are. And so what I tell guys all the time is, if you can instead focus and see and hear the fear behind your wife's question, rather than the accusation of the question, then you can step back and say, oh, wow, how horrible would it be to be married to a man that you are fearful may have or be capable of harming our children? Yeah, but to just be able to step back and put yourself in that place of having compassion for what a terrifying place that is for a mom. Because mom's first thought is, are my kids safe? And if you're like me, like most of us, we're like, well, of course they're safe. I would never harm our kids. And so we get defensive, we get reactive, we get angry. But again, think of it from her perspective. Her world's in such turmoil that she wonders if her kids are safe. How scary of a place is that for a mom? And, we so often think whether we've been in recovery 20 months or 3 months or 24 years, well, surely we're past this, right? And the reality is that these wounds go so deep that our place is to love them well, no matter how often or how long they come back to the surface. Now, I will tell you, it gets much better. But whenever those triggers come, they're painful, they're excruciating. And it's critical for us to recognize, too, that our wives don't want to be triggered. It's not a choice they make. It's the attack of the enemy, and it's the pain that comes up. And without this awareness, it's so easy, or even with this awareness, our defensive mechanisms are so reactive that we get upset, we get angry at them for being triggered. Which triggers us, exactly. And so it's that learning process. It's that slowing down. It's the taking the breath. It's that, okay, Jesus, what does it mean to love my wounded wife in this place?